He never had riches, power, or fame, just a heart that refused to turn away from hungry children. 10 years later, when a royal warship tore through the skies and landed before him, the world finally realized a single act of kindness can shake the destiny of empires. The settlement at the edge of the galaxy had long been forgotten. Dust storms swept through broken streets, and the smell of rust and hunger lingered in the air. Life here was not about living, it was about surviving, one bitter day at a time. Amid this decay lived a man named Arin. He wasn't wealthy, not even comfortable. His clothes were worn, patched more times than he could remember, and his home was little more than a shack built from scraps. Yet there was something in him that the others had lost long ago, a stubborn gentleness. Most nights Arin returned from long hours of labor with barely enough food for himself. But when he saw the children, thin, barefoot, eyes heavy with hunger, he could never turn away. The world saw them as nothing, as unwanted mouths abandoned after wars and raids. To Arin, they were human, deserving of warmth. One freezing evening, as icy winds cut through the colony, Arin lit a small fire in his battered stove. He had only a handful of vegetables and the last scoop of grain, hardly enough for one meal. Instead of keeping it to himself, he filled a pot, stirring carefully, stretching every bit so there would be enough for all. The soup wasn't rich, but it was hot, and in a place where cold could kill, that warmth was everything. The children gathered in silence, their eyes wide with disbelief. He handed each of them a bowl, his rough hands trembling from exhaustion, but steady with care. He told them silly stories to make them laugh while they ate, even if his own stomach growled in protest. One little boy, shivering in the corner, wore shoes so broken they barely clung to his feet. Without hesitation, Arin pulled off his own boots and slipped them onto the child's feet. Neighbors scoffed at him, muttering that kindness was a luxury no one here could afford. But Arin didn't care. He never gave for reward, never for recognition. His only comfort was seeing the children fall asleep with full bellies for once. That night, as the fire burned low, he didn't notice the faint shimmer high above the colony's sky. Something far beyond the reach of ordinary eyes had witnessed his act. 10 winters passed, and the world had not grown any kinder. The colony remained a place of cracked walls, broken promises, and skies heavy with dust. Life pressed down like a weight, and yet Arin endured. He was older now, his shoulders a little more bent, his hands marked with scars from years of labor. But his heart, though tired, had not hardened. The orphans he once sheltered were no longer children. Some had left in search of work on distant outposts, while a few stayed behind, refusing to leave the man who had once kept them alive. They called him Uncle Arin, though none shared his blood. To them, he had been more than a caretaker. He had been proof that love could exist in the most desolate of places. Arin still scraped by on odd jobs. One day he hauled crates at the market. Another, he fixed broken fences at a miner's farm. The pay was little, sometimes no more than a few credits or a loaf of bread. But no matter how little he earned, he always found a way to share it. A hungry neighbor, a lost traveler, a child without shoes, Arin's generosity stretched thin but never disappeared. One evening, as he struggled to repair an old generator that powered the shack, sparks flew and the machine clattered into silence. He threw up his hands and laughed at himself. "I should have stuck to cooking soup," he muttered, and the children burst into giggles. That small sound of laughter was worth more to him than working lights. Yet deep inside, there was a quiet ache. At night, he would sit outside his shack, gazing up at the stars, wondering if his life had mattered. He felt like a small figure in an endless universe, forgotten, unimportant. The colony officials didn't know his name. The merchants passed him by without notice. To most, he was invisible, but strange whispers had begun to spread. Traders spoke of imperial scouts searching remote colonies. There were stories of unknown signals flashing across the skies, too precise to be accidents. Arin dismissed them with a shake of his head, but a part of him couldn't ignore the unease. The children teased him for always staring at the stars. He smiled, though his eyes lingered on the horizon. Something was coming, though he couldn't imagine that the universe still remembered the man who once gave away his last meal. It began with a sound no one in the colony had ever heard before, a low, trembling hum that rattled windows and shook loose dust from the rafters. People spilled into the streets, shading their eyes as the night sky split with streaks of light. At first they thought it was a storm, some freak weather tearing through the atmosphere. But then the clouds parted, and something far more terrifying emerged. A ship, massive, gleaming, and unlike anything the colony had ever seen. It wasn't a rusted freighter or a pirate's vessel. This one was alive with power, its surface glowing with royal insignias that marked the Empire's highest fleet. Panic erupted. Mothers grabbed their children, traders bolted to shutter their stalls, and whispers of invasion turned into cries of despair. The Empire never visited places like this unless punishment was at hand. Had someone broken a law? Had the colony angered the throne? The ship descended slowly, casting a shadow that swallowed the settlement. Dust rose in thick clouds as the vessel settled on the barren ground. A ramp extended with a hiss, and armored soldiers marched out in perfect formation, their boots striking the earth like thunder. Their eyes scanned the crowd, devices in hand, red lights sweeping across terrified faces. Aaron stood among the people, frozen. His instinct was to move back, to fade into the crowd like he always had. But the lights from their scanners caught him. In an instant, the machines beeped sharply, and the soldiers halted. One of them raised his voice. "There, that's him." Heads turned. People gasped. Him? Of all people. Aaron, the man who could barely keep his shack standing, the one who fixed fences and handed out bread. The soldiers approached, their steps heavy with precision. And then, to everyone's shock, they lowered their weapons. One by one, they bowed their heads before him. Aaron's throat went dry. There must be a mistake," he stammered, backing away. But the officer looked up, his voice steady. "Guardian of compassion, we have come for you." The crowd erupted in confusion. Neighbors who once mocked him now stared as though seeing him for the first time. Children clung to his sleeves, terrified yet proud. And above them the royal ship loomed, silent and waiting. The inside of the ship felt unreal, polished corridors of silver and glass, walls glowing with a soft light that seemed to breathe. Aaron walked stiffly, his boots echoing on the smooth floor, flanked by guards who treated him not as a prisoner, but as an honored guest. It unsettled him even more. He was led into a chamber unlike anything he'd seen. At its center stood a figure draped in royal garments, their presence commanding yet strangely familiar. The guards stepped aside, leaving Aaron alone in the vast room. The figure removed their hood. A young man, no, not just any man. His eyes carried a memory Aaron could not place, but his smile was filled with recognition. "Do you remember me?" the royal asked softly. Aaron frowned, shaking his head. I don't know who you are. I'm just a poor worker. You must be looking for someone else." The man stepped forward. 10 years ago, in the dead of winter, a stranger with nothing of his own gave me a bowl of soup and the only warmth I had known in months. You told stories to make us laugh, even when you had nothing left to give. That stranger was you. The memory struck Aaron like a bolt. A small boy, frail, shivering, eyes hollow with hunger. He had pressed a steaming bowl into the boy's trembling hands, never knowing who he truly was. Aaron's voice trembled. You were one of the orphans?" The man nodded. "I was not only an orphan, I was the heir to the throne, hidden after an attempt to erase my family. That night your kindness saved me. It gave me the strength to survive when I had lost all hope." Aaron's knees weakened, and he gripped the rail beside him. "I didn't know. I was just trying to help." The heir's voice carried the weight of a decade. "And that is why you matter. In a world where everyone turned away, you chose compassion. I swore that when I rose again, I would find you. Today, that promise is fulfilled." Aaron's eyes blurred with tears. He had never thought a simple act, born of instinct and humanity, could ripple through the universe. When Aaron stepped off the royal ship and back onto the colony's soil, the people no longer looked at him with indifference. The same neighbors who once mocked him now stood in silence, their faces pale with disbelief. Soldiers lined the streets not to intimidate, but to honor him. For the first time in his life, the forgotten man was seen. The orphans, grown now, some with families of their own, rushed forward. Tears streamed down their faces as they threw their arms around him. "Anglarin," one whispered, "we always knew you were different." He held them close, his rough hands trembling as his heart swelled with pride and humility. The heir stood before the crowd and declared, "This man gave when he had nothing. He lifted children who were not his own. He showed us what true nobility is. From this day, his name will be remembered across the empire." A cheer rose, but Aaron raised his hand, shaking his head. His voice was steady, though his eyes shone with tears. "I don't want riches. I don't want titles. What I want is simple. Promise me no child under your rule will ever go hungry again." The heir bowed his head. "You have my word. From this day forward, the empire will protect its orphans as you once did." With that vow, change began. Supplies poured into the colony. Food stations, schools, and shelters rising where there had only been ruins. Children laughed in the streets again, bellies full, faces bright with hope. And though wealth was offered, Aaron chose to live simply, still among the people he had always cared for, but now he was no longer invisible. Wherever he walked, hands reached out in gratitude. Songs were sung of the man who fed the forgotten. To the empire, he was a symbol of compassion. To the colony, he was a father. One night, as he sat outside his shack, now surrounded by lights and voices instead of silence, he looked up at the stars once more. But this time, he did not feel small. He smiled faintly and whispered, "All I ever gave was a warm meal, and the universe, in return, had given him the stars."